Father God, we invite you here tonight. I just thank you for these great young people who are part of this class and just making this to be such a great experience. And just pray your blessing would be on them and on our groups tonight and on the material you have to teach us. Just pray your Holy Spirit would be with us and teach us. And we ask for your blessing and your protection tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so let's do the review. We're on page 97, week 7. So the review for Unit 1 first, My Life. We navigated several key concepts and terms that we will be using throughout Healing Journey for Teens. Our main concepts were temptation, crossroads. Life will always set before us at crossroads, intersections where we are confronted with a choice, must choose which way we will go. Pride pathway, unresolved pain, hard feelings, and false beliefs always guide us to pride pathway, or my way. Trust trail, choosing to follow God's way leads to inner peace, joy, and freedom. True beliefs always guide us to trust trail. And the 3 Ps, provision, protection, and power. God wants us to rely on Him for our provision, protection, and power. And then our review of our lesson last week, number 6. God demonstrated His awesome power to the Israelites by releasing them from captivity in Egypt. God demonstrated His powerful protection to the Israelites by parting the Red Sea, destroying the Egyptian army, and delivering them to safety. God demonstrated His perfect provision to the Israelites by dropping manna and quail from the sky. False beliefs about God's character and His relationship with us block us from trusting Him to be our provider, protector, and power. We will only live prosperous and successful lives to the extent that we trust God to be in charge. So that's where we were last week. Let's work on our memory verse. We're going to get your new one this week. So this is our last week on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. All right, let's try it one more time. It's coming along. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Awesome. All right, make sure your cell phones are turned off. And here we go. So, welcome to Unit 2. Unit 2 is called My Mind. So there's some clues about some of the things we're going to be covering in the upcoming weeks. I do want to congratulate you on finishing Unit 1, My Life. We laid down several key concepts in that unit that we are going to use and build on throughout the class. I just read through them in the review: temptation, crossroads, pride pathway, trust trail, and the 3 Ps. So they are going to go with us as we travel through the class. In our first unit, we did take a serious look at our beliefs. We're still working on that. In a sense, we will work on that our entire life. We looked at beliefs about God's character and His relationship with us. And this is going to help you to get a handle on these early in the class, because we will build on them. So last week we jumped ahead 400 years to take a look at Moses and the great exodus out of Egypt and their journey through the wilderness. We learned about the 3 Ps, power, protection, provision, and we learned that when we let God lead our life, that means choosing to allow Him to be our protector, to be our provider, to be our source of power. That's what we mean in specifics when we talk about letting God lead our life. If we don't do that, then we are attempting to do those roles ourselves without His help, and we call that pride. So those decisions come from a place of pride. You can open your Bibles to Acts 7, Acts chapter 7, verse 9. I'll guess we need some Bibles. We'll get them. They're not far away. Usually you guys are immediately opening, and I'm like, why not? It's because you don't have any. We'll solve that. All right, here we go. All right, so in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, the fifth book in the New Testament, Acts 7. So obviously in Unit 1, we became familiar with Joseph's story, taking a close look at that. Joseph is a model for us. He has a lot to teach us about healing. And we're going to go back and apply some new things to his story tonight. As we jump in today, we are going to begin to look at some perspectives on why things may have happened the way they did in Joseph's life. And perspective is a huge part of this unit that we're in. So Acts 7, 9 and 10 says, "But God was with him and rescued him from all his troubles." And that's kind of a provocative statement when you know Joseph's story. It's interesting that Scripture would describe it that way, because we know it was a rough ride for Joseph. It says God rescued him. So from what part did God rescue him? I mean, we know he was in prison and he was released from prison, so certainly that would be an example of rescuing. But he did spend years in prison, so that's kind of curious. Where was God when Joseph's brothers betrayed him? When they put him in a cistern? When they sold him to a caravan of traders? Where was God when Joseph was taken away to Egypt and sold into slavery? This is a question we all ask. Where are you, God? Where were you, God? And we're going to ask that question tonight. So where was God in the first 30 years of Joseph's life? We know his story has a happy ending, but it was a rough ride in his teens and 20s. It wasn't that easy. If we're going to get some answers, and we need to talk about the matter of perspective. So every week here I'm giving you tools and handles to help you get a grip on the healing issues of our own lives. And today is another really important component. Perspective. There's your blank. Perspective. How we see things greatly affects how we're going to do in this process. Perspective is the conclusion we draw on certain events or facts. Perspective is the, therefore, I see it this way. That's what perspective is. Perspective is the judgment we make on a situation or a person or an idea. It is our perspective that tells us something is good or bad, helpful or unhelpful, right or wrong, hopeful or not hopeful, possible or impossible. Jesus tells us we're supposed to have an accurate perspective of matters pertaining to our life. In Matthew 10:16, he said, "Therefore be as shrewd as snakes." That means to be smart and discerning. And there's your next blank, discerning. We need to learn to have good discernment if we're going to successfully navigate this thing that we call our life. So let's talk about an example to see how this might play out. So my dad got a new job and my parents are making me move to another city. How are we going to navigate those circumstances? How well we do in a situation is determined by our beliefs and by our perspective. That's what's going to determine how well we do. So let's say we have these beliefs. God's role is to give me what I want, and if God really loves me, then he will never make me deal with anything painful. If those are our beliefs, then what will our perspective be? Well, God doesn't love me because I want to stay here. Nothing good will come from this move. He has failed as my provider. That's what comes from those false beliefs. So here's a formula I want you to remember. False beliefs plus wrong perspectives equal painful feelings. That's why that happens. That's where that comes from. Are my fear and anxiety coming from my circumstances? No. They're coming from my perspectives, which are not accurate. And this happens all the time. Let's look at the same event from a different angle. My dad is being moved because he has a new job, and I don't want to go. So, what if I have true beliefs this time? What if I believe this? God can be trusted. God will provide for my needs, even when his plan includes hard things. God loves me. So how will those beliefs impact my perspective about moving? It will be painful to leave my home and friends, but God will bring good to my life in this new place. God will meet my needs when we move. God's love for me means doing the best for me and my family. Now what will I feel? Will I still be angry and afraid? Or maybe I'll feel encouraged and hopeful. Maybe I'll have peace in this challenging change in my life. Here's another formula I want you to remember. True beliefs plus right perspectives equals peace in the midst of hard times. So how well we do in a crisis is a lot more about perspective than it is about the circumstances of the event. And there's your next two blanks, perspective and circumstances. This is another very important piece of our healing puzzle. Our perspectives about our painful events come from our beliefs. Nothing has greater impact on your life. Nothing than your beliefs. And that is why it is so critical. There's your blank. Critical. Why it's so critical that your beliefs be true. They're running your show. So let's take these concepts now and apply them to Joseph's story and see what happens. As you know, one of Joseph's painful events was that he was betrayed by his brothers, resulting in a 22-year separation from his family. That was no joke. I mean, that was a hard deal that Joseph had to go through. He was 17 years old when this occurred. So if Joseph's beliefs had been along these lines, what would have happened? God's love means I will never go through something that's hard or painful. God is only good if things go the way I want them to go. What if those were Joseph's beliefs? What would his perspectives have been? Therefore, there's no hope for my situation. He doesn't love me, he can't be trusted, God isn't good. It's kind of a circle that feeds itself. False beliefs lead to bad perspectives, lead to more false beliefs. It's a circle that just keeps feeding itself and getting worse. So how would that have impacted Joseph's feelings and actions while he was in slavery? He probably would have had a tremendous amount of insecurity and anxiety because he would not have been able to receive God's help and encouragement when things got difficult, because his beliefs would cause a barrier. There would be a block between he and God. Feeling separated from God may have left Joseph feeling alone and isolated, hopeless. And without hope, it would have been very difficult for Joseph to apply himself to the work that Potiphar had for him to do. At least not with the same degree of excellence. That could possibly have led to a lesser role, fewer rights and privileges, a harder time for Joseph. This is all speculation because Joseph did choose the other path. he did choose to believe that God loved him, even though God did allow him to be sold into slavery. He believed God was good and could be trusted, and that there was hope. So we don't know what might have been. Those are just some possibilities. Because Joseph's beliefs were true, his perspective was accurate. God has not forgotten me. He is with me, helping me, directing me. He still has a good plan for my life. That's the perspective that carried Joseph through those hard years. Did God expect Joseph to know why he was going through 13 years of hard circumstances? Not at all. God did not expect that. Although God did give Joseph dreams while he was still a teenager, indicating he would rise to a place of importance one day, it would have been difficult for Joseph to understand what those dreams meant, or even believe them when he was in slavery and in prison. So if you were Joseph, 17 years old, recently betrayed by your family, ripped away from your home and your loved ones, and forced into slavery, what do you think your perspectives might have been? Maybe this? Well, there's anything good can come from this now. I have nothing but misery to look forward to for the rest of my life. I'll never be happy. My situation is hopeless. That's a normal human reaction. That's where many people go. As a human being, Joseph didn't have any way of knowing God's perspective while the hard events were occurring. He couldn't see ahead of time where God was taking him and how it all would turn out. But there was evidence that God was working in his life if you take a closer look. So think back to the day Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers and the herds. When the brothers saw Joseph headed their way, what was their first thought? They wanted to kill Joseph. That was their first idea. But God intervened. He did not let Joseph be murdered. He had big plans for Joseph, and that was not part of the plan. After throwing him in the cistern, they were going to leave him there. But there just happened to be a caravan of traders walking by. Was that a coincidence? Or is God working once again in Joseph's behalf? A solution to preserve Joseph's life and get him out of his brother's way. They sell him to the traders, and Joseph is moved but not murdered. When the caravan arrives in Egypt, Joseph's put on display with all of the other wares that the traders have on display for the slave owners. And does Joseph just end up with any old slave owner? No. He ends up with Potiphar, who just happens to be captain of Pharaoh's guard. Another coincidence? Or does God have Joseph's life carefully mapped out? Maybe God was rescuing Joseph all along. Maybe God was with Joseph, helping him every day. Joseph had a lot of training in estate management because he was the one his father Jacob relied on. And that's exactly what Potiphar needed. Because Joseph adapted to his circumstances, he easily and naturally rose to prominence in Potiphar's household. A very fortunate set of circumstances for Joseph. And do you remember the problem Joseph had when he was still with his family? What was the attitude that got Joseph in trouble with everyone, particularly with his brothers? His pride. Joseph was obviously a gifted and talented young man, something nobody appreciated except his father. Pride is what blocks us from being used by God. Pride is the problem. There's your next blank, blocks. Joseph had to learn humility and obedience before he would have been able to handle the position for which God created him. God's preparing Joseph. Slavery and then imprisonment certainly instilled humility in Joseph. God was shaping Joseph's faith and his character, preparing him for the amazing future he had planned. God is more concerned about our character than our comfort. That's not to say he wants us miserable and never wants us happy. I'm not saying that. For heaven's sakes, he's planned heaven for us, which will be glorious and wonderful and pain-free one day. But today, he's shaping our character. That is his goal in our life. This is one of those things that can easily trip us up on the road. I'm so glad you're here to be part of us as we learn these things. We tend to think God should only be concerned with things that make our life easy and trouble-free. And when it's not easy, and when it's not trouble-free, then we begin to doubt God. These are the stumbling blocks. This does not mean God deliberately harms us in order to change us. There's your brain, deliberately. Joseph was in prison because of somebody else's sin. That was Potiphar's wife who was responsible for that. And God doesn't just have big plans for Joseph. He has big plans for you too. You are no different. Even after Joseph was falsely accused of sexually abusing Potiphar's wife, God preserved his life again. There's no reason why Potiphar didn't just kill him on the spot after his wife accused him. After all, he was captain of Pharaoh's guard. He had the power, he had the authority to do that, but he has Joseph locked up instead. Joseph was successful wherever he went. Even in prison, Joseph is recognized for his administrative talents and elevated to a prominent position. God showed him kindness and grace through all those hard years. And he did the same for me. I told you about my 9-year season of healing. During that time in my life, I pretty much lost everything except my kids. I lost my job, I lost my home, I lost my marriage, my financial security. I lived in poverty for a while, lost my friends and my family. I mean, you name it. It was a very difficult time. But through that season in my life, God was always present with me, loving me, helping me through that, and shaping my character as he was healing my life from the hard things I had gone through. He was preparing me for an amazing ministry that I now have gotten to be part of for over 20 years. Did I see any of that during the 9 years when I was going through those hard things and he was healing me? Not one bit. I didn't see one bit of that during those years. All I knew is that I was going through something terribly painful. But God never let me go. He never stopped providing for me either. He carried me through that and used it for good. My perspective gave me the courage and hope that God would somehow get me through those difficult years and put my life back together. And he did that, and a lot more. So now I want you guys to take a moment to think and reflect. Think about a hard circumstance that you have gone through, one that taught you something important, something that maybe helped your faith grow or for you to mature. And I want you to write your thoughts on your outline. I'll give you a moment to do that.